So let's talk about the long-suffering tactical squad in Warhammer 40k. Rarely ever destined to be a strong unit, but perhaps particularly weaker than normal right now. Let's talk how they stack up in game, and the one way that you can field the models that is really strong, but maybe not the most helpful to everyone. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today we're talking firstborn Space Marines, and in this video I thought we'd do an overview of the tactical squad, talk through their models and datasheet, supporting rules and weighing them up against a couple of competitors, and probably the best way to field the models in game right now. In the lore, the tactical marines are the epitome of the firstborn Space Marine battle line. For the vast majority of 40k's history until relatively recently, tactical marines have basically been the iconic Space Marine figure. Your average guy in power armor holding a bolter, striking the fear of the Emperor's name into Xenos and Heretic alike. Space Marine Force organisation tended to be a lot more straightforward before all the various equipment with the Primaris came around. The Codex prescribed training regimen for a battle brother would be to rotate with the Assault Marines and the Devastator squads to gain mastery of fighting the foe at close range and at devastating long range, before they were deemed overall well-rounded and powerful enough to fight on the battle line amongst the tactical squads. In battle, as the name might suggest, they can be fielded in a whole number of different ways, adopting different formations and squad tactics to overcome different battle situations, and a general purpose loadout that can be tooled up for certain roles can have them fill into the battle line wherever needed, whether it's laying down blistering fire support or pushing on the foe at devastating close quarters. At time of recording, the box set from Games Workshop is £35, €45 or $60, 2.7 points per dollar right now, which isn't too bad as 40k goes. And if you did want to pick up a whole bunch of power armoured Space Marines with bolters at a little bit less, you could consider the Legion tactical squads from the Horus Heresy. Per bolter armed body, you will get cheaper ones there. For the more standard tactical Space Marine kit though, you get 10 models in the box. I'd say it's kind of a medium-aged kit. It was redone in the not too distant past really, only a few years prior to the release of the Primaris Space Marines. It comes with a fair amount of the gear that they can access, which is quite flexible, a full choice of special weapons, and the vast majority of the gear for the Sergeant. The only thing it doesn't come with is the full complement of heavy weapons they can take. You'd have to do a bit of kit bashing with a Devastator kit if you want to use those. Out of any of the Space Marine army at the moment, the future might be one of the most uncertain things for the tactical squad. As we all know, Games Workshop is replacing the Space Marine lineup with Primaris Space Marines bit by bit. These guys, alongside the Devastators and the Vanguard Veterans, are some of the last holdouts for firstborn tactical armor, at least in the core codex, and it does seem that the writing's on the wall for them sooner or later. In interviews at the start of 10th edition, they said they had no imminent plans to phase out the tactical marines. They were a kit that sold quite well according to GW. But with the massive firstborn range cull that happened towards the start of 10th edition, I can't help but think that the vast majority of the rest of the Space Marines might well be going in 11th edition. Perhaps the biggest question for the Tactical Marines is whether or not Games Workshop will issue a kit that basically updates Tactical Marines and gives them Primaris style bodies, but still keeps the mixed loadouts that they're well known for, or whether the standard Tactical Squad will just become a thing of the past, a relic of 40k's history, and Intercessors will just fully take over their role as your standard Space Marines on the battle line. If you were looking to pick up Tactical Marines for a last hurrah for the firstborn, I'd probably consider doing so at a discount retailer. I do have several of them linked down in the video description, from Element Games in the UK for 15% off, Gap Games in Australia for 20%, or Wargame Portal in the USA for 15%. Can mean that you can get the squad or any other 40k at a discount compared with buying through Games Workshop, and anything bought through those does help to support the channel. If picking up these ones though, I would certainly bear in mind the potential limited lifespan of the kit. There's a very good chance they do get removed or updated sometime in the future. My guess would be at the turn of 11th edition, which if following Games Workshop's usual edition rollout timetable, that would probably be a bit more than 2 years from now. In any case, models and Primaris updates aside, let's talk rules in 10th edition. In Codex Space Marines, your standard tactical squad costs you 160 points per 10 men. Unlike the vast majority of other Space Marine squads, there is no option to take them in less than 10 now, so you can't take them in squads of 5, even if their combat squad rule does allow you to field them as such practically. We'll get into that kind of double-edged sword in just a second. Otherwise, they are a Space Marine battle line unit, so you can take lots of them if you want to, and they're objective controlled too. It does mean that they have a little bit more weight on objectives compared with most other Space Marines, and for effectively 80 points per 5 models, their standard 2 wound Space Marine profile isn't too bad. They just have a standard 2 wounds, toughness 4 and a 3+ save, Really not terrible for 16 points. I'd say they're not fragile, but probably wouldn't go to the point of saying they're just outright durable, given how many good AP multi-damage weapons there are out there. The standard weapon of the tactical squad is the bolt gun, which has kind of seen better days really. It gets 2 shots to 24 inches at strength 4, AP 0, damage 1, not awful for small arms I guess, but I must admit it was a little bit depressing to find this was just so much inferior to the bolt rifle in 10th. Intercessor bolt rifles get you a pip of AP extra and also get the heavy and assault keywords. I feel like they didn't really need to be quite that far ahead really. It would have been nice if your standard bolter had either had the AP or the heavy and assault keywords, just literally to have a little bit more parity. The bolt gun damage output really isn't very impressive for your standard tactical marine, certainly the big draw to take them compared with the other more Primaris equivalent light troop units is that you get heavy and special weapons in the units, something that most of the more infantry killing Primaris don't really get very much of, if any. For the special weapons, you get the choice between Flamer, Grav Gun, Melter Gun, or Plasma Gun. I'd be tempted by the Melter and Plasma for the sort of mid-strength multi-damage attacks there. And then perhaps more exciting is the heavy weapon you can get. Go-to choices for those seem to be the las cannon or multi-melter for the most part, perhaps the two weapons that are most likely to punch up and really do something incredibly meaningful. You also do have the choices of grav cannons, plasma cannons, heavy bolters, and missile launchers, or a second special weapon. Though in all honesty, just for all-around value, I think it's hard to beat a las cannon, something that can just give you a big punch to threaten enemy heavy armor, even out of a relatively light squad. For melee, when they get into close combat, they get 2 attacks each. Maybe a little bit disappointing there, given that standard intercessors get 3 attacks there, and the Chaos Space Marines with bolters also get 3 attacks too. Just feels like a bit of a needless disparity that keeps these guys further behind. Can't help but think that if their Chaos Space Marine direct equivalents there, who certainly aren't Primaris, get this, these guys should too. Finally though, for their last bits of special gear, they can take a fairly tooled up Sergeant. A 2-attack Power Fist or Thunder Hammer would probably be the way I'd go. Makes the squad just a little bit more threatening to enemy elite infantry, and he can take a fancy pistol on top of that, maybe a plasma pistol or combi weapon if they want. Finally, we come to the tactical squad special rule, which is combat squads. This one harks back to previous editions of Warhammer 40k, and it's the ability to split a tactical squad into 2 separate units. So you could do interesting things like, I guess, put 5 bolter bodies on a home field objective, and then put all the fancy gear and more dangerous weapons on a squad that's going to be venturing up the board. You could maybe think about keeping the heavy weapon with the home field objective if you just wanted it laying down a bit of fire support. I'd say it's not an unhelpful rule to have, as if they were locked to big unwieldy 10-man squads, they'd be even weaker than they are right now. But at the same time, I do get the sense this rule is just giving these guys what the rest of the Space Marine army already has, the ability to be fielded in 5s, so it's not an enormous ride home that these guys can do it too. I feel like if this was the main offering, they probably could have done with a second special rule on top of that, maybe keeping the original one that they had when they came out in 10th edition. Being able to fall back and shoot was something at least. Otherwise, if you do choose to field them in combat squads, you're basically still getting 5-man Space Marine squads like you could have bought elsewhere. But these ones just don't come with a special rule, you literally are just getting their war gear and that's that. Overall, as you can probably guess, it doesn't really weigh up amazingly well for tactical marines right now. They're kind of a rarity in competitive play. Their main advantages being they're at least cheapish marine bodies with objective control too, which isn't unhelpful for scrapping over points. And their main draw is getting things like las cannons and melter guns within the unit, which you might not be able to have if you're fielding more purist Primaris. On the downsides though, there are lots of negatives. Bolter damage is poor compared with intercessors. A special rule only really gives you what other squads can do, as mentioned. There's loads of competition from all the other Space Marine bodies out there, all doing their own interesting things. Their damage is kind of generalist and not really doing any one thing particularly well, particularly at this points cost. And while they do have good character access, this doesn't really mean that much given that they're some of the last units that characters would generally want to lead. It's often better to put them with anything that's going to deal a bit more meaningful damage. I feel like they're always going to get compared to intercessors, particularly as per model they're both 16 points now. The Primaris intercessors went down a bit and these guys didn't. And I feel like if you just make a short list of the positives and negatives, the intercessors do win really quite hard. On the intercessors' point of view, they get the better AP, they get the assault and the heavy keywords, they get more attacks on that Sergeant Power Fist, they get more attacks on the regular Marines as well in close combat. They get that sticky objectives rule, which is genuinely handy to have to mark a home field objective. It can be taken in squads of 5 rather than having to mess around with combat squads. And beyond that, there's plenty of things that feel like side grades. Grenade launchers are arguably better than a special weapon given that you keep the bolter, the durability is even, and transport and character access has a few variations, though nothing I'd consider enormously meaningful. I feel like the only advantage that the Tactical Marines have is the heavy weapon they can field in the squad, one las cannon or heavy weapon per 10 models. It's definitely not nothing, but that's taking a whole load of downsides to get that one big hit. I don't personally think that it gets enormously better with unit support either. In general, being a kind of inefficient troop damage dealer unit, they're not usually going to be one that you're going to try and do big buffs or synergies with. That's usually going to be better to go on your elites and scary units. Though if you do want to try and make them work, there are a few things that might help in a pinch. Obviously, Oath of Moment can help with damage, Armour of Contempt could be alright on objectives, and grenades could add a little bit of threat up close. For transports and characters, they really feel like they're just not really worth bothering with the extra investment. I guess maybe a cheap Rhino wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. It could allow the heavy and special weapons to fire out the top and get them to the midfield, though it does maybe feel like the wrong ratio of threats to transport compared with some armors out there. I guess you could theoretically use a Razorback, maybe put a melter gun and a multi-melter in there, and have them jump out for some wound rerolls. That doesn't feel like the end of the world if you have the bolter bodies on a home field objective. For this one, I don't think I'm going to go through the entire list of detachments and chapters. Maybe Ironstorm Spearhead is particularly nice for some rerolls for las cannons, I guess. Otherwise, Vulcan Hestarn and the Firestorm Task Force both could be fun with multi-melters or melter guns. Potentially getting Strength 10 melters, rerolling the wound roll could be fairly savage against Vulcan's marked targets, advance and shoot not being the worst to keep them in range. Overall though, a lot of these synergies do feel like things that will be stronger on other units rather than these guys though. As mentioned at the start of the video though, it is interesting that there is still a way to make Tactical Marines absolutely top tier for Space Marines in 10th edition, though it's not necessarily the most helpful for everyone out there. It seems that the way that Games Workshop set up the datasheet, the secret way to make Tactical Marines good that I'm sure plenty of people already know, is basically to field them as firstborn Crusader squads for the Black Templars. It is weird how these two are balanced really. Just kind of strange how a 5-man squad of these just compares with a tactical squad, and it's just all around flatly better and cheaper for the investment. If you absolutely wanted to make a whole load of firstborn power armor models work, this would be the way to do so. Though it would mean playing counts as Black Templars, so you wouldn't be able to use other chapter specific characters if they weren't Templar ones. If you're trying to make Tactical Marines work via using the Crusader Squad datasheet, I'd field them in 5s. It's 75 points for a 5 Space Marine unit, which is already cheaper than the 80 points essentially it is for the more regular squad. Never mind the option to field them in smaller squads just outright, so you could take one of them or an odd number of those 5-man units if it made sense. They're still battle line and still objective control too, and you can spam them if you want to, and this is actually a unit that plenty of people do choose to spam. Then compared with the Tactical Marines, they basically get all the fun war gear that the Tactical Squad do, but only condensed to the 5 models. So it means that you're not paying the full 80 point price for the extra 5 more boring bolter models. It means every 5 firstborn Crusader Marines get all the fun stuff, and they only have 2 regular Marines with bolters in them. In the units you can have a heavy weapon like a las cannon or a multi-melter, a special weapon like a melter or a plasma or a flamer, and then the sergeant can still take a power fist and also gain access to an inferno pistol if they want. Basically it's all the positives, none of the negatives. You can still attach characters as if they were a tactical squad, and as an added bonus they even still get a special rule. They get to re-roll advanced rolls and charge rolls. I wouldn't say it's the most impactful special rule in the world, but it certainly beats the squad splitting one, which has no better effect once you've taken the choice to split them in half, which you basically always would. In that format, the firstborn Crusader squads definitely see competitive play. Here's one example for a top placing Black Templar army list that are featured on the channel. This one by Kevin Zollinger, who used it to take first at Firebug Open. This one has 4 of those units in a Black Templar Ironstorm Spearhead. They're using a melter gun, multi-melter, Inferno pistol and Thunderhammer on those Marines. Really quite nice options for the rerolls to hit and wound that the Ironstorm Spearhead can bring. It looks like there's 2 10-man teams hitching a ride and 2 rhinos up the board, allowing you to shoot some multi-melters from the top hatch if you wanted. And overall that does feel like a really efficient little formation. 225 points for a rhino with 2 genuinely quite scary Space Marine squads inside, as opposed to both the more expensive and less threatening tactical version that you can get in the core codex. The list in general just feels like it is more of a generic Space Marine list trying to pretend to be Black Templars. There's literally no special characters or anything like that, just multi-melters on the tanks and Crusader squads acting up as tactical marines, so certainly could be one option to try and get more life out of a firstborn army if you wanted to. I must admit I do find it kind of fun that Rhino Rush tactical marine equivalents can still basically be doing quite well in 40k 10th edition, even if it does feel kind of long after their era right now. Overall though, for the more traditional tactical squad, I would currently rate them as kind of weirdly overcosted. I feel like they were really deserving of a points drop at the same time as Games Workshop did so for the Intercessors and Assault Intercessors, and honestly I feel like given that they weren't really taken compared with those very much before, they probably needed to drop even more than then. I honestly can't really see people taking them over Assault Intercessors that much if they were 150, so maybe dropping down to something like 145 points would be a good starting point to see if they get played then. In general, in the Space Marine Codex, there's really quite a lot of competition for all the various forms of Space Marines with bolters or light infantry killing weapons out there. And unfortunately, the Tactical Marines just really don't bring anything to the table that people want all that much. I feel like for just about any role that you could play them for, I feel like a combination of different units would probably do you better. I guess maybe in an ideal world, have the one more dangerous half of the squad move forward and attack, and have the bolters maybe with the heavy weapon on the defense. You could maybe use something like a transport, like a Rhino or a Razorback if you wanted, I guess. I feel like realistically that wouldn't be unplayable, probably wouldn't hold back an army insurmountably or anything like that, though I still feel like you're probably not going to have that as the optimal choice. Say for example, for a similar sort of role, you could field 5 Intercessors for the objective work and then 3 Eradicators for the danger work. That would cost a little bit more at 15 points more, but then you get a genuinely ruinous anti-tank squad, rather than one that's trying to act up to be one. Probably not the best single example. I guess you could also say Assault Intercessors plus regular Intercessors in 2 5-man units. They'd work quite well for the same role as well, and would be cheaper. Let me know your thoughts though. Can you think of any other specific reasons to take Tactical Marines in your army? Or have yours been having some good success in any formation in yourselves? Look forward to hearing your thoughts. I do feel like if you wanted to make them work en masse though, it's probably going to be trying to run them as Black Templars, even if that might be a bit weird, and that Firstborn Crusader squad is probably going to go away as soon as the actual Black Templar Codex comes out. In any case, look forward to hearing your thoughts on Tactical Marines. Feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics if you'd like to see more like this. I do tend to post new videos just about every day. Finally, if you have been enjoying the videos on the channel, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page as well, and you can find that linked in the video description if you'd like to help support and keep these videos coming. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things happen next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.